All right, welcome everyone back to the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast, episode 14. I am Jesse Collings. I'm here with my co-host, as always, Jason Ounpraseuth. Jason, how's it going?
It's going well. It's been a hectic 24 hours, and we'll get into that. And you know, all hail our new overlord, Nick Khan. Is all I can say.
Nick, someone a few weeks ago told me that, not told me, like I just saw it on Twitter, so it wasn't like some
Right.
inside source was telling me, but said like, oh, Nick Khan could end up running the whole wrestling business. And I wasn't like, I was like, okay, I mean, I doubt it. But I had been noticing that Vince clearly is a huge fan of him, and
Mhm.
he's got a level of savviness and just like I don't know that, like, I honestly don't know that much about like George Barrios and Michelle Wilson, like what their backgrounds were, how effective they were in their jobs. I don't really know that much, but it seems like Nick Khan just has a level of understanding when it comes to things like media rights, when it comes to answering questions and the energy and vibe he kind of gives off. It seems like he's like I don't want to say like he's better, I think, at this public element of the job than a Barrios or a Wilson. And it's gonna be really interesting. You see a big shakeup. Obviously, the story about Mark Carrano getting fired, but a lot. Last night there was like a huge bloodletting. They got rid of I think the director of communications. They got rid of
Mhm.
somebody who was in merchandise or something like that. They got rid of some long-standing. I know John Cone, the former referee,
Yeah.
who was an executive backstage. He's gone. Like they got rid of some people who were around for a really long time, and I think that it's likely that they're going to be replaced by Nick Khan people. But we're not here to talk about Nick Khan. I know this has become a gimmick where we talk about something that's not related to what our actual topic is for the first few minutes. But what we are here to talk about is life after WWE, particularly for wrestlers who have either asked for their release or been fired or let go from WWE, and what their careers look like afterwards. And we're going to talk a little bit about people who have found success outside of WWE, and we're also going to talk about people who were recently let go by WWE and what kind of their career aspirations look like. And to start, we'll talk about the last week, the releases. I believe it was 8 talent in total. Maybe it was 9. I have to count. Well, I'll count them later. But the talent that were released in kind of what has become a WWE tradition, which is to release a wave of talent post WrestleMania, when you're kind of hitting the reset button, starting the year over on the WWE calendar. And WWE released a bunch of names. I'll just read them off right here. Samoa Joe. You've got the IIconics, Billy Kay and Peyton Royce. You've got Wesley Blake. You've got Mojo Rawley. You've got Tucker. You've got Chelsea Green. You've got Kalisto. And you've got Mickie James. I think that's everyone. Am I missing somebody?
You say Bo Dallas?
Yep. Bo Dallas. Bo Dallas, who has not wrestled a match since 2019. Also, finally, the axe finally came for him. But let's start with Samoa Joe, because he's the biggest name and he's the person that I think most people are the most excited about in general. Now that Joe is gone from WWE, Jason, what was your kind of reaction to seeing Joe being gone, and where do you expect to see him pop up next? Assuming he still wants to be in the wrestling business, which by all accounts he does.
Right. Yeah, that seems to be the impression that he still wants to do wrestling. Pending health, of course. I'm sure he'll get a lot of check out with doctors and all that, so you can still wrestle. But yeah, I mean, just on that alone, like, because he couldn't wrestle, he was doing commentary on Raw for a couple months, and it seemed like, oh, this is like his transitionary role until he can wrestle, or even if he couldn't, he could just be with WWE for a long time, like in the new Corey Graves, so to speak. But then he got released, and then that put a turn on everything about the expectations within him. Like, it was so strange that you had a guy that was in the ring during WrestleMania, and then he gets released after that. It was just so shocking to see that. Like, oh, because like we said before, like you mentioned before, like Bo Dallas wrestled since 2019. It makes sense why he gets cut. But Samoa Joe, like, he's been used every week on your flagship show. I mean, SmackDown is probably your flagship show, but Raw is always the bigger show. It's just in general, and he's doing the commentary there, and it's just so shocking to see him released. And as of now, we'll have to wait and see. Of course, Punk and Joe, they've been teasing a match. That's probably stirring up the dirt sheets, basically, just get more clicks for them. Like, they'll actually have a match. But could Samoa Joe go Ring of Honor? I could see that. Maybe he takes a 1-year deal, like a prove it deal, just to show that, hey, I can still go, I can still wrestle. Because it's been a while since we actually seen Samoa Joe in the ring, and so I can see him take a 1-year deal of Ring of Honor, wires a little bit, get his footing back. I'm sure there's probably some ring rust in there, just to get himself going. And then, after that, he could sign a bigger deal of AEW, perhaps, because right now, look at AEW, it seems pretty packed right now. Like, it's pretty hard to see him sort of just randomly insert into a storyline, especially with Double or Nothing coming up next month. Like, it's really hard to see him just pop up right away. And we'll definitely see him take a 1-year prove it deal at Ring of Honor right now. I don't know. What do you think, Jesse?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you bring up the prove it deal. I do think that there are talents that, if they want to continue wrestling, are going to maybe have to take a prove it deal somewhere, as opposed to maybe walking into a big spot in Ring of Honor or in AEW or perhaps New Japan. The thing about Joe is that my understanding is that the reason he was, out of action for so long was because of concussions. And concussions are different than regular injuries. It's possible that he's not medically cleared, but it's also possible that he's good to go. And if he's good to go, then I think the sky's the limit for him. Someone was saying, like, this is not, I was listening to the Voices of Wrestling show, and one of the points was like, look, Samoa Joe's not the same guy, physically anymore that he was in 2005 or 2006 when he was, when he had his feud with CM Punk, or he was killing it when he wrestled Kurt Angle. I think that was in 2008. In TNA, and when he was like peak Samoa Joe. But to me, like, Samoa Joe, as long as he's medically cleared, like, it doesn't even matter to me that much if he's not like an amazing, relentless worker. Because to me, with Joe, you're getting a guy who still has like an aura around him as a badass. Mm-hmm. Like, he's Samoa Joe. He's just, and that's what he's always had. And even if he's not as athletic as he used to be, if he's not as doesn't have like the cardio that he used to have or whatever, it still matters that he has like a badass aura around him. And he's a great talker. And in AEW, when you're allowed to cut your own promos, or, basically everywhere you're allowed to cut your own promos except WWE, mm-hmm. He's still going to get over. He's still going to have that aura. And even if he's like, okay, you can't count on him to have a 5-star classic with Kenny Omega, if he can still go out there and he can produce entertaining programs, and he can be a top challenger, he can put people over. He just has a level of like badass credibility that's hard to find. And even if he's even if he's kind of like, I don't want to say damaged goods, that's kind of a mean thing to say, but even if he's not 100% what he used to be, he can still be extremely useful and a huge asset wherever he goes. That could be Ring of Honor, could be AEW. He's obviously been a lifelong fan of Japanese pro wrestling. If you ever watched him wrestle, that's pretty obvious who he patterned himself after. I could see him doing kind of a John Moxley-like deal where he's going to do some important dates in New Japan, and he'll also be, around in AEW. Anywhere would be happy to have him. And, you raised an interesting point about, like, yeah, Joe, like, he wasn't Bo Dallas, he wasn't Tucker, he wasn't Wesley Blake, he wasn't Kalisto. Like, yeah, he wasn't wrestling, and maybe he wants to wrestle, and that's why he asked for his release. Because it's unclear of who got released because they were fired, right, and who got released because they had asked for their release previously and they were just being let go now. Because I think mm-hmm. that kind of overlaps between both people. But Joe was on TV all the time. He was, your color commentator on Raw for 3 hours every week, plus your pay-per-views, and he was good. Like, he was a good commentator, and I think that WWE liked him as a commentator. I don't think that I never really heard or got the idea that WWE didn't like him as a commentator because they, had him out there all the time. And if Vince hated him, he wouldn't have been doing commentary on Raw. So yeah, it was kind of weird to see him go. But if he wants to wrestle and he's healthy to wrestle, then I think the sky's the limit for him.
Yeah, I mean, Samoa Joe can be it's like Christian Cage. Like, obviously, Christian is not in the same physical peak he once was, but he can still work. He can still tell good stories, and he's shown that through 2 matches. At least in my opinion, anyway, through his Kazarian match, he showed he can still go, and it was Will Hobbs match. He showed that he can tell a good story within the ring, really helping out, elevating Will Hobbs to another level, really giving him the rub by working with them. And Samoa Joe's the same way. Like, he obviously has a fantastic mind for pro wrestling. You hear this guy talk about pro wrestling, like, he obviously knows what he's talking about, and he knows how to tell all these amazing stories with anyone.
Yeah, I mean, Samoa Joe, I know this is true for most people, but Samoa Joe just loves pro wrestling. It's really obvious that he loves it, and it's hard to, I was like, hey, assuming he still wants to be in the business, hell yeah, he still wants to be in the business. Well, one of the things about concussions that's different, like when you miss time because of concussions, which Christian is another one who missed a ton of time and was effectively retired due to concussions, is that, and Daniel Bryan talked about this when, he had his era of retirement, which is because you're missing time because you have your concussions, and they say you can't clear because of concussions, as opposed to a chronic knee issue or back issue or shoulder issue or something like that, is that you actually, as if you continue to go to the gym and you continue to work out, even though you're not, going to return to the ring, you feel better. Like Daniel Bryan said that I feel better physically than I have since I was, a teenager, because I haven't been wrestling. I'm not taking that pounding every week or, multiple times a week. And it's frustrating because I feel like I'm healthier than ever and I can wrestle at a higher level than ever because I've had this time off to let my body heal. And for Samoa Joe, who hasn't wrestled, I think, in over a year, he could be in better shape. Obviously a guy who's been wrestling his style for the length of time he wrestled had plenty of lingering injuries. And realistically, by the time he came to WWE and by the time he made it to the main roster, it might have been too late for him just physically, because I think it's true that his body was breaking down, so that he was never going to be able to reach that potential, as opposed to if he had made the main roster 10 years earlier. But that doesn't mean he's not useful. And I'm interested to see how he can go, because Christian is in Christian's older, he looks older, but cosmetically he looks like he's in great shape. Edge is a similar thing. He had a neck injury, not a concussions, which is very different kind of, I guess, from a pain standpoint. But Edge came back and he's he looks older, and I think maybe that could be problematic just because you don't want your top guy to look like he's 50, but physically, look great. He's leaner. Got abs. Looks. I don't think if Samoa Joe has abs and he's leaner, AEW should put the world title on him. But moving on from Samoa Joe, I don't know if I'll go through everyone on the list. Is there who else from this released class are you, I guess, either surprised to see let go / interested to see what they do next? Who else jumps out at you?
I guess another surprise would be Billie Kay, and I guess in association with her, Peyton Royce. Billie Kay sort of a similar standpoint for Samoa Joe, in that whether you liked it or not, she was at least doing something on television in most weeks on SmackDown, even WrestleMania as well. It was pretty mixed on whether people liked her comedy segments.
She was getting pins at WrestleMania.
Yeah, exactly. She was doing something in the company, and to see her get released was shocking. And of course, that report came out of Kevin Dunn saying he didn't quote get Billie Kay. It's kind of just screams like this sort of, I guess, how out of WWE is. It's always about what they want, and not really reacting to fans, because these, Billie Kay and the IIconics, they have a huge loyal fan base that they have. People were shocked when they got broken up. We talked about this, how WWE had no plans for them after that. They kind of just put Peyton Royce in random tag teams, and same with Billie Kay. She would always try to find her own tag team partner, even though already in a tag team? Why can't they just be one themselves? And even Sean Ross Sapp, he's pointing out that like, hey, NXT has these new tag titles, and it already feels like they've already run out of teams to tag with for the champions. It's gonna be the Way versus Ember and Shotzi forever for the next couple months because they've already released a good depth of their tag team pool, and so that seems very shocking to see both of them get released.
Yeah, I mean, with the IIconics, it's, they unfortunately suffered the fate of a lot of similar tag teams or units that are, people who are better off as a team, and then they get split up for no other real reason other than just, we need to shoot an angle to entertain our fans, so let's do a team splitting up. Yeah, let's do that. And there's plenty of people. You can look at Rusev and Lana. You can look at Heavy Machinery. I mean, Tucker is another person who got released and is almost in a similar boat. Kind of like, it's interesting. Tucker and Peyton Royce maybe don't have a lot in common, but they were both part of a tag team that, whether people liked them or not, had some form of charm that allowed, they had their fans.
Yeah.
And they got split up for no reason. They never even really did a good angle to like, it wasn't like it built up to a huge match. And then, Billy Kay, who, I mean, if you were to during the IIconics run, if you were to say who's going to be the breakout star from the IIconics once they split up, I probably would have said Peyton. I wouldn't have said Billy. But Billy, through comedy, was able to find a niche on SmackDown at least. And Peyton was just, wasting away on Raw, not doing anything. And this, Tucker, similar thing. Tucker and Otis. Otis got a comedy push similar to Billy Kay's to a degree, and Tucker got nothing. And Tucker was wasting away, doing nothing. And I think that's unfortunately the reality of WWE, especially if you're in a tag team, because the company doesn't value tag team wrestling. They don't understand or consider the value of a team. As soon as it's been said a million times, as soon as you start getting over, WWE will start thinking of a way to break you up, because in their minds, they're thinking about the angle of the breakup and how, it's going to be Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty, or it's going to be, a real famous tag team split up. And, they split up people who have no business splitting up. They split up the Hardy Boys. They split up the Dudleys. Who splits up the Dudleys? I know, this was back in, I think, 2004, but they split up, Bubba Ray and Devon, and they gave Devon this weird preacher gimmick where he was yeah, that's how Batista originally made his main roster debut. But it's like, why would you split up the Dudley Boys? But that's what WWE does. They split up people because when they run out of ideas for you as a tag team, just split them up, as opposed to maybe rethinking them. Where do you think the IIconics are going? Do you think, let's assume they stick together. Maybe they won't. I have no idea. Where do you see them going?
I think ideally, Impact already has women's tag titles, and so that'd be a good spot for them to build up their women's division. Just last night, Rachel Ellering made her debut, and so they're obviously adding more talent to their pool that they are. They already have great talent with Deanna Prato, Jordan Grace, and a bunch of other talents over there. Ring of Honor, they just announced, I think it was this week, right? They're doing this whole women's tournament kind of thing. And so they're obviously trying to rebuild their women's division over there as well. And so I think that would be good places for them. I think you wrote about this as well, how the IIconics aren't really big enough for AEW, but I think they can grow to be big enough to eventually maybe be on AEW. But I think right now, as they are, I think being on Impact or Ring of Honor be good places to really establish themselves, and they'd automatically be big names just because they're former WWE.
Yeah, well, my thing with the IIconics in AEW is that personally, I just don't think they're that good in the ring.
Sure.
And AEW, to me, their women's division, they need, if they're looking for people to add, I would think less comedy, entertainment based, more like serious pro wrestlers that can carry some of their less experienced talents.
Sure.
That they're looking to push. I think the Hikaru Shida Tay Conti match from this week is a good example of getting a veteran worker in there and helping a less experienced worker with potential reach that potential in the match. And I don't think I don't see their role. I think Impact's a great spot for them because, and also, if you watch Impact's TV, which I'm a casual viewer of, I'm not like watching every week, but the kind of vibe they're going for, they do a lot of comedy, they do a lot of backstage skits, they do a kind of a very sports entertainment-y style show, and I think from their personalities, I think they'd be a better fit in Impact. And as far as Ring of Honor is concerned, they apparently are trying to push their women's division again. They're trying to make a more investment in it. And look, any of these women who got released, whether it's the IIconics, Mickie James, or Chelsea Green, I think Ring of Honor would love to have any of them because A, they have name value, but B, they can also bring something to the division that is pretty bare bones at this point. There's not a lot there in Ring of Honor. Is there anybody else you want to talk about? Let's talk about Mickie James real quick, just because I think that she's been in the news a lot due to the center. You know, if people haven't seen it, WWE sent her remaining belongings. I guess they were stuff she's, I don't know if it was her gear or just stuff she had, in the locker rooms or whatever. They sent it to her in a trash bag with her name duct taped to it, and it was email